One of the great things with market research companies is they get to see work in all categories for all brands. And unsurprisingly, they suddenly realize things, general common patterns, which often are denied to the rest of us. So that's why it's a particular privilege to be joined today by Andrew Tindall, who's the Senior Vice President at System 1. System 1 is one of the most sort of respected and most interesting and innovative research companies, I think it's fair to say. Now, System 1 is a research company. I think I can hand over to Andrew now and say the origins of the name and what makes you different as a company doing research.
Yeah, I mean, it was founded by John Kieran, who I think you know.
Well.
It was originally called Brain Juicer.
That's right.
Which I only joined because of the name System 1. I thought it's absolutely genius. And I'm a big fan of brand consistency, but I think this is one of the rare examples where changing to System 1 makes complete sense. But yeah, John Kieran literally pioneered emotion-first measurement in terms of creativity and kind of marketing.
Now, interestingly, your background is effectively in medicine and I guess biochemistry, is that right?
Yes, yeah. I studied medicine at UCL, great uni.
So one of the most annoying things about working in marketing is that there are too few people with, I think, one of the best people I ever worked with, Darryl Fielding, I think is a biochemist by background. And what you might call the complex sciences or the medical sciences, annoyingly, people who study those things tend to go into bloody things like medicine rather than marketing.
Yeah.
Terrible, isn't it? But what? So I've always believed that study of it could be another brilliant person I worked with, Brian Sassoon, I think was a geneticist.
Oh.
But the study of the science of complex interdependent systems, which obviously a human body and a human brain inarguably are, seems to me to be an absolutely brilliant gateway drug to being a good marketer. It's very interesting because also everybody who understands medicine, automatically understands that small interventions can have huge effects.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is one of the things and actually the neglect of the creative side of the business relative to the media side of the business, which I think is a complete misdirection of effort engineered by tech firms for their own self-interest.
This is my personal mission. So people are kind of obsessed at the moment with attention and stuff like this, but a great example is it fluent attention? Is that attention bringing your brand to mind? But these two things, creative and media, have to start talking to each other.
And so the fact that these things are actually determined independently in silos is a kind of absurdity in many ways. Because the nature of the message you need to convey will affect your media choice. Yeah. And your media choice will have a fairly major bearing, I think, on the efficacy of that message.
Completely. Yeah.
In other words, the same information, that arrives in an email. So it can be absolutely textually identical and visually identical, and a piece that arrives, say, in a piece of physical mail will not prompt the same emotional response. And you've got reliable research data, I guess, that shows that time and time again.
I mean, I've got a slight issue with the the effectiveness industry on this, because we're talking about mail in your massive red living room, Rory.
Yes.
And if you often look at media research globally, there's great charts, isn't there, looking at kind of the long-term impacts versus short-term impacts and the brand building impacts of different touchpoints, media channels. But mail's often left out of these charts. It's often not included in these studies. And you have to really go rooting round for effectiveness data. But when you actually go and find it, you actually see that, it makes complete sense. Mail is a medium that surprises and delights, right? So there's a cost signaling piece and the effort, that transaction. But there's also what you struggle finding in all the attention research, but JIC Mail have just done some research on this, looking at the attention of mail, is that this thing lives in your home with you, doesn't it, for multiple days?
I think 7 days, and that's an average, by the way. So we talked on some of the earlier episodes about the toast rack effect.
What's this?
If you've got a piece of mail, one of the crucial things, by the way, to any kind of persuasive communication is simply timing. Yeah. Now, most things, the timing is determined very largely by the advertiser. They put out the message, you either see it or
it's gone. Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's an argument with press advertising that you're reading press ads at a time when you've chosen to read things. Yeah. Okay, you're in reading mode.
Yeah.
But mail has an additional level of that, which is you will put it aside for a moment in which it is then, you'll effectively, I suppose you can do that with email with the snooze function, but you will actually keep it for a period when you feel it is appropriate and desirable for you to actually deal with it.
Yeah. I found this recently, so I've been doing some research with the FE Worldwide database, case library that we've been working at System 1 to turn it into this a wonderful database, because as I said, I was quite frustrated at the sense that a lot of media research has eight media channels in it, and it often leaves out little of a touch points like brand partnerships, direct mail,
sonic
events.
Branding possibly. Direct mail is always overlooked.
Yeah, another example. I mean, so we found this in this research with Effie, where you can actually look at I think some of the Ritson's talking about overlooked things in marketing and advertising, and I think one of the smartest things that someone's come up with recently, I think it was Ian Gibbs, who works at the DMA and is part of JICMail, this concept of a super touch point, which is essentially what we're talking about.
Perfect.
So I love this idea, and I went and tried to kind of prove it with the FE
By the
data.
way, it's amusing that digital media people use the word touch point to describe a medium where touch is not involved.
Yeah, exactly.
So touch
yeah,
point
ironic.
It's actually an eyeball point.
Yeah.
It might be an optic point, but it's not a touch point.
Again, which kind of makes the thinking even smarter, this idea of a super touch point, which is essentially kind of like a luxurious touch point with a consumer that rationally might be almost hard to explain. It costs a little bit more than a digital banner ad or something, but it does a lot more in terms of an effectiveness point of view.
And one of the things, tell me a bit more about this research, because
sure.
It intrigues me, because it's really, really useful.
Well, JICMail kind of started this off, I think, with a roundtable talking about the concept of a super touch point. It's more emotional than other media channels. Yeah. It's got higher attention, perhaps physical. So it literally speaks really well to direct mail. More emotion, more attention, physical. Has a high cost of signaling. I think I also found that somewhat in the research where there's a brilliant, almost perfect negative correlation between how good a channel is, and I think this confirms a lot of marketing thinking, like Les Burnett and Peter Field's kind of long and short of it, but how good a touch point is at driving that immediate sales impact and how good it is at driving a long-term lasting brand impact. There's a brilliant negative correlation. At the very top, you've got contests and promos. We'll always drive a sale, but will very rarely drive a long-term lasting brand impact.
Can you there's a negative correlation, I can understand that completely. Yeah. And also because, of course, if you're selling on price, it's a mark of a lack of confidence which erodes trust.
Yeah, exactly.
In other words, if you need to discount this thing, do you really have faith in your product?
Yeah, exactly.
This is, by the way, absolutely decisive. So effectively, normally there's a kind of short-term sales effect actually is deleterious to long-term
completely.
brand.
Again, a contest or promo is a perfect example of pure sale will struggle to build any brand impact. Or like an on-pack kind of promo will do great at driving sales because it will speak to those who are in market, but will struggle building those long-term brand impacts. Whereas we found
physical mail actually weirdly bucks the trend.
Yeah, well, it's great at driving, I think, 90% of campaigns in the FE global kind of database that we've been working on, with mail in them, drive a direct sales impact within 6 months. But they also have this strange awareness, differentiation, trust-building impact that puts it directly into the super touch point arena, whereas kind of paid social and digital display sits squarely on the opposite side of this trend. Did you see the Hicks-Cox ad by Uncommon where it looked like red wine had been spilt all over the whole pack? Have you seen this?
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant, right? So the letter itself looked like someone had spilt wine on it, and once you'd opened it up, it actually was about accidental cover.
Perfect.
I think how brilliant that is, and I think one of the missed opportunities, we've talked about the benefits of direct mail and how physicality, emotion, and attention kind of puts it in this super touch point arena, but like that is just half the story. It's also a canvas for if you put proper creativity into it. Like the sky is the limit. That's another thing we haven't really talked about, how marketing lives within a context. Like I think we've talked about how media budgets are moving towards more skippable, more passive kind of stuff. AI is making creativity more just lackluster. If you bother to do a creative idea that's emotional in a channel like direct mail that's kind of higher attention and physical, you get this brilliant kind of creative dividend, don't you?
And there's a sort of extraordinary value to the unexpectedness. Now, if you think about part of the potency of the Economist campaign, which was a 48-sheet poster campaign, at least originally, it then took other formats.
Yeah.
Part of the efficacy of that, aside from obviously the brilliant art direction and David Abbott's brilliant writing, was the fact that you didn't expect a publication to advertise on 48-sheet posters.
Yeah.
In other words, there seems to be a sort of multiplier effect you get if you appear to someone in a channel they weren't expecting.
That is so true. I mean, I think it's half of Sky's broadband business has been built via direct mail to houses. Sky's not using TV or BVOD or SVOD to build that. They're reaching people via direct mail. I also think it's a great example of that because it's all very consistent to their other advertising across the mix. So the creative message is very similar, but they're choosing direct mail to reach the right people at the right time. So then the next obvious question is then, how do you build trust? And it's not telling people they should trust you.
So it's gone from being almost a given to being a mark of a distinction or literally a form of differentiation.
Completely.
Being trustworthy is now a form of...
Yeah, it's the second most linked thing to profit in the IPA data bank. It gets more and more important. And I literally do think that's because we're seeing budgets move towards media channels that are less trust building. As you said, it used to be assumed and now it's not. So then the next logical step is how do we build trust? And you can look again at Peter Field's data where he can separate campaigns that do have a touch point in them, a media touch point, and not, and then how likely they are to actually lead to trust impacts. So I went and did the same thing in the Effie data bank, and you can see mail is a driver, including mail in your campaign, is dramatically lifts the trust building power of that campaign. Probably because of things we've talked about, right? Everything we've talked about, costly signaling, the physicality of it, the high attention of it, the fact you can hold it, the fact that someone's taken the effort to send it to you. So, and then the other part of it as well is being consistent, as you said. Consistently showing up in the right ways is how you build trust, which I think is becoming more and more important in a more digital, skippable media landscape.
Yeah, completely.
So it's actually a procurement metric, right? CPM, cost per million, or as Karen Nelson-Field calls it, cost per useless million or cost per useless thousand or something like this.
Yeah.
It's a procurement metric because it's a measure of something that you've ordered. It doesn't necessarily mean it's been delivered anywhere, seen by anyone, done something, got any attention. But the most grotesque example now is there's a lot of digital display ads that are actually, I don't know if you've ever legally streamed a movie, Rory. You seem to be doing quite well, so I presume you don't need to illegally
There
stream.
was a time.
There was a time.
Yeah.
Well, there's all those pop-up ads, and there's not just one pop-up ad on those sites. They're actually stacked with like 10 of them. So someone's paying, the poor sucker is paying for, loads of CPMs behind that they're not even seeing. And I think a much smarter way of looking at it is actually kind of cost per attentive reach. When you look at direct mail as a good example of how much does it cost for every second of attention you get, then these things actually, when you're not looking at it from an efficiency standpoint, it becomes more of an effectiveness kind of metric.
Interesting. That's fantastic. Well, Andrew, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. For all of you listening, if you'd like to unleash the power of direct mail and you'd like to learn more about how to do it, not just for immediate response, but for long-term brand value, I hasten to add, then I suggest you head over to marketreach.co.uk. Andrew, once again, it's been a huge pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Rory.
Thank you.